Good evening. I'd like to call the June 14th, 2023 Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller-Herrera?
Present.
Mr. Dotson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
Mrs. Collins?
Present.
4 present, 1 absent.
Quorum is present. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Coppola, will you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Like not with it today.
I don't know if all of you remember, but we had on Earth Day, on Saturday, April 22nd, we had cleanup at the Kiwanis Park, and I believe that we had some of the students that participated. It was a great day. We did a great job at the park, and so I'd like to present them with a certificate. So if you'd come up when I call your name. Please forgive me if it's not perfect. Gianna Frizone? Gianna? No? Nazi Allah? Here, take some. Whoops.
Madeline Schultz.
Mia Peterson?
Caleb Pacelli.
Tegan Lowe?
Maya Romeo. Okay, at least they were there on Earth Day.
Zoe Miller? Zoe? Thank you so much for participating.
Anthony Liu?
He's not here.
No.
Sydney Reifenberg? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vincenzo Di Costanzo.
He's not here.
Cale Sullivan? Thank you so much for helping.
Kylie Millett. Kylie Millett. Sorry if I got that wrong. Thank you for your help.
Thank you so much. Jesse Mathis? Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Hannah Newell.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm going to butcher the last name. Hannah Brookrill?
No, she's not here.
Lynn Lee.
No, I think that's all.
Is there anyone from Rotterdam Troop 3054? We have Isaiah Delman.
It's not me.
What about this? Harry O'Connell? Thank you very much. They did a great job.
Sign-in sheet.
Okay, we'll now move to privilege of the floor. I'm going to ask you to keep your remarks to around 4 minutes. I'll raise my hand when you're close to your 4 minutes, and you can wrap up your remarks. Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Greg Foot.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Craig Foot. I live at 21 Princetown Road here in Rotterdam, New York. Madam Supervisor, distinguished board members, I come to speak tonight about voter integrity within our own town and in the county. An audit conducted by a group known as New York Citizens Audit produced the following information on the 2022 election, specifically election facts for Schenectady County. Schenectady County voter rolls maintained by the New York State Board of Elections demonstrates that 405 voter discrepancy exists between the state county precincts and the tabulation count between the New York State Board of Elections. There was a 334 vote discrepancy between Schenectady County precinct voting tabulation and the New York State Secretary certified results. Additionally, a 71 vote discrepancy exists between New York State Board of Elections and the Secretary of State regarding Schenectady County. Schenectady County voters maintained rolls by the Board of Election, and I'm going to call them BOE from now on, shows that there's 1,960 duplicate IDs assigned. 96 of those people voted. Vote early, vote often. Schenectady County voter rolls maintained by the New York State Board of Elections shows that 88% of the voting age population of Schenectady County is registered to vote. The following age groups from 18 to 100 have excess of 95% voter registration. Ages 31, 41, 46, 57, 66, 67, 85, and 94. The following groups between ages 18 and 100 have excess of 100% voter registration. If you were 73 years of age, 101% of them are registered. 74, 106% of them are registered. 78, 103% of them are registered. 96, 106% of them are registered. And other ages at age 100, 110% of them are all registered. Schenectady County voter rolls maintained by the New York State Board of Elections demonstrate that 6 people voted without a resident address in the voter roll. 7 people voted that had an out-of-county address. 327 people registered after the cutoff date. All of them voted. Schenectady County rolls said that 8 people voted were purged from the records prior to 2020. Also, record voter rolls maintained by the records of Board of Elections show that 179 people voted from 6 nursing homes. The total number of regular votes in Schenectady County was 1,028. Analysis shows from a method known as the Dr. Frank capture method that gives a polynomial constant, says that these demonstrate that the turnout records that they were not organic. Compared to Albany County, Albany County is a whole lot worse. Our friends in Albany County had 1,221 people voted without a residence in their voter roll. 10 people voted an out-of-county address. 789 registered after the cutoff date. Every one of them voted. 19 people voted who were purged from the records. 4 people voted who were deceased. 61 people voted that were older than the oldest living resident in the United States, whose name is Edie Cabell. She's 115. The nearest closest one is Aaliyah Murphy. She lives in Harlem, and she's 114. The Albany County voter registration maintained at the Board of Elections demonstrate that 52 people voted from 2 nursing homes, 129 people voted from 2 retirement homes. The total number of irregular votes in Albany County was 3,004. The people of the town of Rotterdam, Schenectady County, and the state of New York need to have voter integrity. Resolutions should be adopted by this group to not allow existing voting machines to have its data dumped onto flash drives and transported to the Board of Elections. There should be an established chain of custody, what there currently isn't have. The voting machine should be able to give the voter receipt confirming the vote and the people and candidates they voted for. It can either be printed out or sent to an email address. Work with the county and state officials and demand voter ID. If the people really truly want to make their votes count, they need to make sure that the procedures are put in place to make sure that it actually does without fear of tampering. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Could I do that to be part of the record?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Rosemary Furtado.
Good evening. I would like to first thank our town supervisor and the board for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Rosemary Furtado. I live at 2175 Lynn Street in the town of Rotterdam. As a concerned resident of Lynn Street, I would like to call the board's attention to a property located at 2188 Lynn Street. This will be the second time this property has been brought to your attention. It was spoke about at a previous meeting by my neighbor, Gary Fox, who lives directly across the street from this property. My neighbors and I have been dealing with this derelict property for over 3 years now. The lawn is over 2 feet tall. There is brush from a tree that fell years ago all over the side of the house, along with an old camper and dilapidated furniture spilling out of the open garage up and down the driveway. Drive by on your way home. See it for yourself. Code enforcement has tagged the home in violation in the past. The most recent violations were posted on May 19th, 2023 for Code 308.1, accumulation of rubbish or garbage, and Code 302.4, weeds. The notice stated that the owner had until May 23rd, 2023 to comply or if formal enforcement actions would be taken. As of today, there has been no improvement. On May 26th, 2023, there was a small fire in the home. 2 fire departments, 3 Rotterdam police cars, and code enforcement were present at the scene. Code enforcement was able to gain access to the inside of the home, and the house was tagged again, this time pursuant to sections 107.1 and 107.1.3, stating that the structure is considered structurally unsafe and unfit for human occupancy. National Grid was called and the power was turned off, and the town of Rotterdam came and shut the water off. Rotterdam police told us to notify them if we saw anyone on the property. Several neighbors made calls in the days that followed and were finally told that the property owner had the right to enter the property, just can't reside there. On June 9th, 2023, the fire chief was called to the property for a report of smoke billowing out of the chimney. The smoke was due to the homeowner burning garbage in the fireplace. And today, code enforcement was called yet again as the homeowner had an electrician at the house attempting to get the power back on. My question is, if this property is tagged unfit for human occupancy, why is this owner still allowed to be there with no power and no running water? It does not appear that she is there cleaning out the house. There continues to be cars and people in and out of the residence all day long, just as it was before the house was deemed uninhabitable. This property is not only an eyesore, but a danger to everyone who lives on and uses Lynn Street. We have residents with small children on both sides of this property. There are people walking with strollers and pets, runners, and an increase of through traffic due to the Vista residences. I'm concerned that something bad is going to happen on the property or someone is going to get hurt due to its current condition. This property has repeated violations and to date 0 improvements have been made. It was deemed uninhabitable, yet there are people going in and out all day, every day. This has gone on way too long and it's unacceptable. I'm requesting the board to please look into the status of the noted violations and provide an update on what, if any, resolution the town is pursuing. Thank you for your time.
Rosemary, Lynn Kapler.
Hi, my name's Lynn Kaffer. I live at 1034 Beverly Street. Not far from this lady over here where it is a mess. But that's not what I'm here for today. But I'm here about the traffic. Like she's saying, there's a lot of people that walk in this neighborhood and everything. Since they built the Stewart's, I was here before trying to tell them not to go down that way with Stewart's, make everybody exit out onto the main road. Traffic is ungodly. We need some stop signs. We need something. You go around to all these other neighborhoods, there's stop signs. You go out here, there's stop signs all over the place. You go on the other side, there's stop sign there. You can turn by Adirondack Tire and fly to Stewart's without even stopping. And these walkers and people that are coming from the apartment building, they walk, they got strollers, people are out there walking all the time. Someone's gonna get hurt. These people are nuts. They got a motorcycle shop down at the end. They come through with their motorcycles, they got Harley Davidson, they just fly up down the road. It's out of hand. I just would like to see something done. There's some stop signs. The trucks, there's tractor trailers going through there. And I've never had tractor trailers going. We got tractor trailers going through there. This is a residential area. So I'd like to see maybe some weight limit signs or something. People are going to Stewart's for diesel now, and the traffic is unbelievable. I don't know if this is a place that, to come and say something, but we need something done in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Fox?
My name is Gary Fox. I live at 2185 Linden Street in Schenectady. I have the reputation of living across the street from the house that's there. I spoke to this board before, and as always, I always thank you and appreciate at least the time I spend here. I have spoken a number of times at this house, about this house, and Rose did a fantastic job, so I'm not going to second guess any of that. I just want to list a couple things that are against your ordinances right now. Rose already talked about the grass. It's up to my waist. There hasn't been mowed yet this year. Since I've lived in that neighborhood for 7 years, there has always been at least one unregistered car parked there. Sometimes it's in the middle of their front lawn, sometimes it's in a driveway, sometimes they put a plate on it and go to Stewart's or some other place and come back and take the plate off of it. But it's always there and it's always unregistered. They have an RV parked out there. My understanding is that if you have an RV, you can't park it in the front of your house, right? But there is an RV kind of on the side lot, half in the front yard, half on the side of the house. Like I say, that also is against your ordinance. She's had a garage sale going on for the last month and a half. People are coming in on a daily basis, walking through the house, going wherever they want, and hopefully buying some things. Like Rose said, most of the furniture comes all the way down the driveway. And since I've lived there, and maybe some of you would remember, the only time anything really happened, really got cleaned up, was the day that a dumpster owner dumped from their front yard, a 6-yard dumpster of garbage out there. And her husband came and cleaned it up. What I'm asking for now, because the entire neighborhood has contacted, everybody that they can. What I would love to see this organization do, and I'm looking at you people, I would like to see you come up with an ordinance, a law, or whatever it takes to give our police department the authority to do something, give our code enforcement the authority to do something. Because coming there like they did today and take pictures isn't doing us any good. They probably have better than 10,000 pictures of that house in the last 7 years. And from my perspective, nothing's been done. She's been ordered to do things, and she just does nothing. No matter what she is asked to do or told to do, never happens. So thank you for the time, and please consider some type of a law that you can give our police department and our code enforcement authority to take care of these blight conditions in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Patty Meltowitz.
Hello, my name is Patty Madowitz. I live at 457 Sanborn Road. I'm here to speak about the battery and wind moratoriums. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for responding to the Energy Advisory Committee's email recommending the moratoriums and seeing that they're on the agenda for today. Thank you for that. As you're voting today and considering whether or not to implement a moratorium, as we all know, a moratorium isn't, it's a pause. It's not a stop to or in any way trying to impede green energy. We all understand the need for green energy and reducing the carbon emissions all over. As you're making your decision, I would just like to read an email that I sent to the board just as a reminder of some of the reasons why I personally sent the email. So the email to the board is, hope this finds you well. Thank you for supporting the solar moratorium. Thank you, Mr. Christou, for seeing the urgency and seizing the moment by your motion. Thank you, Mr. Mastriani, for assembling a diverse group of residents forming the Rotterdam Advisory Committee. It is our pleasure to serve our community. Thank you for listening to the residents. In the course of our advisory committee meetings, it became realized the town currently has no battery storage code for projects that are in the wind. There is a 650-foot wind turbine proposed in the adjoining town of Florida. The town of Florida is 2 miles from my Pattersonville home in Rotterdam. Pattersonville has spaces that are suitable for wind. There has been a lot of changes since our wind code was developed. Some substations fall under utilities. Due to these findings, the committee requested a battery energy storage and wind moratoriums. And I'm saying my email was a little bit out of order. I apologize for that. Regarding substations, an 80 by 160-foot substation is proposed 257 feet from a Rotterdam resident's home in rural Pattersonville. Substations need to be evaluated as well due to the health concerns related to electromagnetic radiation. And then there's a section that just says, what are the health risks near solar farms? And that includes a hyperlink for you to look at to see some of the health effects. Please support the Energy Advisory Committee and endorse a battery, energy storage, and wind moratorium. Please endorse this for the safety of our residents. An update to the utility code to include substations and equipment or structures that emit EMR cannot be within 900 feet of occupied buildings. We understand that moratoriums should not be entered into lightly. We understand it is all of our duty to ensure the safety of the residents and be fiscally responsible to the town. Please allow the Energy Advisory Committee the time to research and make the best recommendations for our town that support the comprehensive plan, ensure the safety of the residents, protect the great aquifer, and provide maximum financial benefit. Thank you for your time.
please reach out to me by phone, email, or text with any questions. Respectfully submitted, Patty Madlitz. So, and as we're talking about battery energy storage, it's my understanding that the Burdick Street project is exempt from the moratorium if it were to be passed. I also recommend that there be something in place that a battery energy storage station doesn't just go up with no code, no nothing in place. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody who did not sign the sign-in sheet who wishes to speak? Okay.
I got a little something for you, Ms. Collins. So you don't have to wave your hand, and you don't have to call me out. There's a buzzer. When it gets to 4 minutes, hit it, and I'll stop talking. Brenda Terosian, 1033 6th Street, Rotterdam. All right, I'm not gonna, what I wanted to talk about today is the report, but I'll put that on hold till next month. As some of the residents here talked about unkept properties, in my street, corner of 6th and 3rd Avenue, there's a brick house. The young girl and her daughter, they vacated the place. Windows are open that much at the houses. My neighbors have come and talked to me because they know I come to the town board meetings. So they said, please address this, because they are afraid of squatters occupying the place. And if squatters come, you're not going to get them out of there. May Avenue, got my house in the back, is a dilapidated building. It's got a thing on there. You can't live there, whatever. The place is a total mess. The weeds are this high. Every once a year, the owner or the person in the front will cut a little bit of the lawn. This is the time of year. I'm going to assume you guys all know this. The ticks are at record high. You have all that kind of greenage growing, and you got kids or animals, and they get ticks. You know, I think Rotterdam does have a responsibility. I don't know what the responsibility is, but something needs to be done. My neighbors have come to me and asked me, please address it to the board. I hate to disappoint them, but I don't think whatever I have to say holds much water. But I told them I would. If you come by 3rd Avenue, corner of 3rd and 6th, the front did get mowed down by my neighbor down the street, and I kind of asked him, I wish you didn't do that so code enforcement could see it. But he was concerned because there was a young child involved. So my neighbors are concerned about squatters going into that house. In back of me, I'm done weeds, ticks. That's a big deal. I will reserve the report till next month. Now, I don't know what happened. Mr. Dawson, maybe you can answer the question. Had it be two meetings ago, had it been two meetings ago, you addressed District 5, the water situation. And I'm pretty sure that was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, just correct me if I'm wrong. You explained about why in District 5, that's my district, why the water bill tax this year is $97.18. You explained it, I raised my hand saying, I know I'm not supposed to speak, but could you please explain it, because I wasn't understanding. And then you explained it again. You did a great job. Great job as a salesperson. Still didn't understand it. And then I asked you bottom line, what's it costing us? And you said it's gonna be $97, whatever. When I went to look at that YouTube video, that portion was not there. Of you explaining, me asking, you explaining again, that portion of the YouTube was not there. I looked at it 3 times. Maybe it wasn't the Rotterdam Junction one. Can you tell me, when did you address that? I'm asking you, when did you tell, it had to be at Rotterdam Junction. Do you remember?
I do remember at Rotterdam Junction.
No, I think it was Rotterdam.
It was Rotterdam Junction, and I'm wondering if Mr. Moore had already turned off the camera, because I remember the
We have hit our
strongest,
4 minutes.
yeah, the strongest part of that conversation was almost as you were leaving the meeting, and I'm wondering if maybe the video camera wasn't on. But I do remember you having that conversation at the Rotterdam Junction.
All right, I know, just give me 1 more minute, please.
You're at our 4 minutes.
Okay, that's Miss Collins' call. I'm sorry. But,
I stand with,
okay,
I know.
again, I'm gonna bring up the 4,000 people that this town didn't recognize in our water bill. And
Sure.
did it
We're at
happen?
our 4 minutes.
All right, fine. But somebody talked a little more than 4 minutes.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
My name is Melvin Mintz. I live at 2273 Helderberg Avenue. I did not intend to speak tonight, but listening to all the speakers, first of all, I'd like to make a recommendation in general for the board to look into legally about these property throughout the town that are in this kind of conditions that have been described tonight, into legally taking the property, period. And it becomes the property of the town. And then it could be cleared, totally removed, and resold at some point for new housing on the property. There has to be somewhere in the state, some law that allows a municipality to take over property that reaches a certain stage as been described tonight. And I'm asking this board, legal counsel, and whoever, Molly, has to look into the town obtaining and taking this property immediately over. Suing the people that own it, confiscating either their funds or whatever method. It's not up my alley to know what or how, but there has to be a method in order to clean up. There is other property, I believe, in the town that has also been that way as described today. Not many. We have a wonderful town, a wonderful place to live, but we need something that hits these people who miss the way they take care of their property and they don't care about anyone around them. I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that didn't sign up? Andrea?
Hi. Hi, I'm Andrea Coppola. I live at 625 River Road, and this is Linda Foote. I live at 21 Princetown Road. We serve on the Parks Committee, and it has come to our attention that we're missing a couple, three Shellmont Honor Society students with certificates. So could we just read their names?
Yeah, and I'll check because there were some more on Megan's desk.
I was here, and I didn't.
You didn't see it?
I apologize, guys. I'm students of Shellmont. We're very, very sorry. The names are
Oliver Baker, Ian Bernardi, Abigail Felno.
And are they here?
I think
Yay!
These are honor students.
Yeah, and my advisor, Miss Priest or Susan Priest, they have another ones. They're on that here. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. If we miss anybody else, please let us know.
We'll make sure that we get the proper certificates and letter to them. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak? One last call. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, then I'm closing privilege of floor. Before we move on to our resolutions, I would like to say, anyone who's spoken tonight, we try to not respond while you're speaking so that everybody has time to speak. But there are a couple of things I'd like to address, so please, if you don't have someplace else to go, wait for our resolutions to be over and we'll address it under miscellaneous, okay? All right. Our first resolution is Resolution 190 of the year 2023, and the clerk will read.
To accept the town board meeting minutes of May 24th, 2023.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 191 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept revenue for town clerk's office for May of 2023.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 192 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To appoint Donna Lavasser to the position of account clerk.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes, and I think Donna is here tonight.
Yep.
Congratulations. Resolution 193 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To appoint Ryan Dufek to the position of senior wastewater treatment plant operator.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 194 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To appoint Nicholas Kozakowski to the position of wastewater treatment plant operator.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 195 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers to the 2023 budget.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 196 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize the purchase of 2 vehicles for the Department of Public Works.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 197 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute a contract with Santor's World of Famous Fireworks, LLC.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera? Before I vote, I'd just like to say I'm glad to see that we're doing this. I know as part of the bicentennial, we tried to set up fireworks and COVID hit and everything shut down, so I'm glad we're going to be able to bring the community together in this way, so I vote yes. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 198 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize the supervisor to modify the administrative agreement with Delta Dental.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 199 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To allow spotted lanternfly traps at Kiwanis Park and monitoring by Cornell University Cooperative Extension, Saratoga County.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll
second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 200 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Prime AE for professional engineering services related to the mercury minimization plan.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 201, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute a contract or agreement with CT Mail Associates for landfill monitoring services.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 202 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize purchase of chlorine gas.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 203 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To recognize the introduction of an introductory local law of 2023 to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the Town Code relating to a change of zone from single-family residential R1 to retail business B1 and refer to the Planning Commission for report and recommendation.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Explain my vote on this. It is yes. This is just a referral to our planning commission for report recommendation, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 204 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
Requesting bids for Rotterdam Junction Water District 3 and 4 leak detention survey.
Is there any discussion? I would like you to know, if you got the agenda, it might look just like this. But this is the whole packet, so in case anybody is interested, we will make a copy for you if you'd like to peruse it. Not on anybody's reading list tonight, huh? Okay. Do I have a motion? Well, first, is there any discussion?
Again, I just want to explain that this is leak detection of water mains. We're trying to get a better handle, again, down in Rotterdam Junction of how much water that we're actually losing that doesn't make it to a tap, and that's done under a leak detection program.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 205 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept an award bid for 6.3 mm polymer modified hot mix asphalt highway resurfacing.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 206 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept and award bid for mill and fill with type 3 dense binder highway paving.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's a tie.
Same.
Seconded by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 207 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To enter into an agreement pursuant to Highway Law, Section 284 for town highway paving for 2023.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes and 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 208 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To recognize the introduction of introductory local law number of 2023, establish a 6-month moratorium prohibiting battery energy storage system installations with the town of Rotterdam and scheduling a public hearing thereon.
Okay, is there any discussion? I'd like to just say that I agree with what some of the speakers have said here. It's not that we are opposed to green energy, but our code has never been brought up. I mean, it's changing, the industry is changing overnight, and we can't go by old codes to protect the town and to protect the residents. So until we get the correct code in place, then I'm for a moratorium so that we have control over what is built and how it's going to be decommissioned in Rotterdam, and not at the taxpayer's expense. Is there anybody else under any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to again thank the Energy Advisory Committee for their persuasive information at our last meeting that did allow us to move this in a expedited manner. So thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
In explaining my vote, I'm not typically a fan of moratoriums. I think they give us too much time to kind of put things on the back burner and not address them in a timely manner. However, I think 6 months is a reasonable time period for us to come together to work on something that is in the best interest of our community. Therefore, I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 209 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To recognize the introduction of introductory local law number of 2023, establish a 6-month moratorium prohibiting wind generation systems installations within the town of Rotterdam and scheduling a public hearing thereon.
Is there any discussion? I'm going to just reiterate what I did for battery storage. Again, it's just to bring our code up to speed to protect the residents and our environment. All right. Is there any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Just explaining my answer or my vote one more time. I'm not a fan of moratoriums generally. I believe 6 months is an appropriate period though and reasonable for us to work through some of these issues as well as get feedback from the public through the public hearing process. Therefore, I am voting yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 210 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To amend Resolution 16.23 of the year 2023 to appoint Sarah Morrison to accountant part-time.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. I'll second. On the question, Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. During our agenda meeting, there was a motion made by Mr. Dodson to authorize the supervisor to negotiate, to add Resolution 211 to our agenda for tonight, or our meeting for tonight. So will the clerk please read Resolution 211 of the year 2023?
And I just want to make sure, wasn't it Joe Mastriani that made the motion and Jackie seconded it? Or no, am I wrong? I thought Joe did.
I officially made the motion.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Jack
Okay, I just want to make
suggested
sure.
the motion be
I
made.
just want to make sure.
I made it.
To authorize the supervisor to negotiate and execute an agreement with Comp Alliance.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion? And do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. That concludes our resolutions for this evening. We'll now have liaison reports. Are there any board members that wish to speak under liaison?
Yes, Madam Supervisor, I'd just like to report that the Parks Committee met this month at Jurassic Park. There were some suggestions that were made about what could be done there. Dog park, dog run could occupy that space. We also had some neighbors that came and spoke about how there was once at one point a beach volleyball court there. And we've made contact with the Mahonison varsity volleyball coach, who has offered some specifications about how a beach volleyball court would be built, and offered his and his team's assistance in seeing that. We're also working to convert that once tennis court there to a pickleball court. So it was very productive meeting the Parks Committee during the summertime meeting in an actual park and seeing kind of hands-on, what needs to be done and what ideas could be put forward. Also, the Energy Committee is meeting tomorrow night. We are having a presentation about the 2019 New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's a comprehensive presentation, open to all members of the community, even beyond Rotterdam, if you want to have a good understanding of the basis that this act, the Climate Act as it's known, was generated, and it will help the Energy Committee, put into our current, moment, what we're tasked with, coming up with new code for these new green technologies and understanding New York State's reasoning. And that is tomorrow night at 5:30 in this room here. So, all are welcome.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak under liaison? How about under miscellaneous?
A couple things for me. First, I guess I would like to thank all the volunteers, the veterans. I'd like to thank Megan, the confidential secretary, for all the hard work put in for the Memorial Day parade. Very successful, great turnout. Very pleased to see the community come together for events like this. I would like to be able to address the Water District number 5 from privilege of the floor. Water can be complicated, especially billing, and I did read the Gazette article, much to my dismay, after this issue was discussed. Why did our bill reduce down to $97.18? One of the things that we're really working on here that I had mentioned in my previous explanation for this is to get a handle on units in our town for different special districts. And there's been a considerable emphasis of this administration really to get into the details. Part of getting into the details was analyzing how many true units do we have in Water District number 5, and why is it important? We're in a round of funding again that ends around July 27th. The state does this once a year. Every different funding opportunities relative to grant and loans has to be submitted by July 27th. Part of that process is to give us a form that's called equivalent dwelling units. Equivalent dwelling unit, again, just for your information, is typically what a single family home would use in water for a year. Pretty easy in Rotterdam, we don't meter, but we know there's roughly 10,000 or so residential units in the town of Rotterdam. What's more important, what can be missed, is we actually meter commercial units. So the state, when they look at funding, they like to know what is the equivalent in our commercial units relative to equivalent dwelling units. And that's one of the things that we saw that was missed as part of the budget process when it came through is we're required now to go through and determine for a business. If a typical single-family home uses 75,000 gallons of water a year and a business uses 150,000 gallons from a meter, they're 2 equivalent dwelling units. So in that process of doing that evaluation, there's about 4,000 equivalent dwelling units in our commercial metered accounts that factor into the equation for debt service, okay, and for our operation and maintenance. So again, I read the Gazette article again with dismay because it's confusing in the fact that it talked that we missed 4,000 of our residents. I can tell you we did not miss 4,000 of our residents. We did miss the equivalent of the commercial accounts in that calculation, and that was corrected, and that's the reason why the bill went down. I hope that's on tape this time.
When I asked at the last meeting an explanation, you didn't give any of us an explanation. So you got 10,000 people out there that don't know what's going on.
I can say I think that I've done it twice.
You know, all I tell them when they ask me, I tell them, wait till next year, and wait till the year after, because it's gonna go sky high, because you guys aren't explaining anything to us. That's where I'm getting frustrated.
You should tell them to email, text, or call us. We're available.
Okay, yeah, all right.
They should
This is
wait
what the
a
meeting
year.
is for. This is what the meeting here is for, to answer residents' questions. But evidently, you only answer certain people's questions, and a certain person you do not answer. And that's very frustrating for me and for my neighbors and friends who are asking me questions, who are asking me, please bring this up at the town meeting.
Brenda, respectfully, he just answered your question.
And I will say that I'll acknowledge that I believe I answered that question. It was just brought up in the junction. I tried to be very clear about it. I believe in our last meeting, Supervisor Collins answered the question again relative to, we have a $34 million water project coming up in our town and what the impact was. And she clearly stated at this point in time, based on no grants, which we're continuing to work on, what the maximum cost would be to a typical residential property owner in the town of Rotterdam. We're not deviating it. We put the numbers out there. We're going to continue to put them out there. As we get into the details of this project and the funding becomes more clear, we'll continue putting out information. There's no reason for our board not to be transparent on this. You know, this is a monumental project. The town of Rotterdam hasn't done a $34 million water project ever. Not to mention, I don't think we've done any substantial water projects since maybe the 1950s, okay? As I explained in at least the time that I've been here, we need to step up to the plate. It's that simple. You know, there's conversation about, geez, why is the town of Rotterdam putting water conservation in place, water emergency? It's simple. You know, when we go from a water demand of 3 million gallons a day in April, and we come into a very dry period in May, everyone likes green lawns. It's the spring. You're doing all your cleanup and stuff. Well, that has an impact on our water system. Our water system goes from about 3 million gallons a day to 10 million gallons a day. Well, it happens to be 10 million gallons a day is at our high limit of what we can actually put out of the plant. It's not the capacity at the plant. It's what we can hydraulically put out of our plant from our pumps through our distribution system to the very far end of it over at the May Avenue tank, which is a 2 million gallon tank. And our operators are very good. They look at it. They're monitoring this all the time. When we get into these high demand situations and we can no longer keep our May Avenue tank filled, which is over in your neighborhood, we start to get alarmed because from our standpoint, the May Avenue tank and these large diameter tanks are to meet peak hour demands in our distribution system. That occurs between 6 o'clock and 9 a.m. in the morning, 7 at night, and 9 p.m. at night, okay? Those tanks are designed to meet peak hour demands. But more importantly, they're designed to meet fire protection. And the last thing that we want is a home burning in our community while people have green grass, okay? Homes are way more important, okay, than a green lawn. I love green lawns, okay? But I also realize, again, that when I'm told in a water emergency that we're at our peak, okay, then I guess my lawn's gonna have to go brown. In our community, there's a lot of people that are diehard, that gotta have a green lawn. I appreciate that. Unfortunately for us, in the situation that we're in right now, is a brown lawn, make sure that your neighbors have fire protection, including you, and then in worst case scenario, we all have drinking water. We all can shower. That's extremely important. However, in your defense of the green lawn people, that is why that's initiating this $34 million water project.
I don't use water to
I'm-
water my lawn.
I'm only
Well, ask
explaining.
those people that are abusing
Let me
it.
explain. Again, the increase from 3 million gallons a day to 10 million gallons a day is our sprinkling systems, okay? That's the bottom line. That is why we see those peaks. And we understand when they occur in springtime, it can happen during the summertime, but it's generally between May and August and September of every year. Our job as a board now is to recognize that, determine what in our distribution system is limiting our capacity to deliver, and that's being addressed, and that's going to be addressed with a rate increase. That's why we're trying to be so transparent about this.
I didn't catch your last name, Len, but just so that you know, I will refer this to the police department. Usually if any resident calls me up and says that I think there needs to be a stop sign or can we put up weight limit signs or anything like that, I usually refer them to Sergeant Barone of our police department. They monitor the situation, and then usually 9 times out of 10 you will see it'll go up. It has to have a public hearing, believe it or not, if we're going to change it, but then we will go through the process and see if we can get some kind of stop signs or whatever. I know where you're talking about.
Several, so when we go
Yeah,
slow down.
and slow them down.
Speed bumps, they're terrible.
I don't know if you want to.
Let's see, there ain't no exception.
That we do have. And I just want you to know too, that is, I know because I talked to the code enforcement, they do come out to your street. They are trying to, I'm assuming, build a case because at some point in time, I'm assuming, I'm not a lawyer, that it would go to court or whatever. And I know that, I know they're very concerned. They can more than understand that they wouldn't want to be the neighbor to this house. And I've driven past the house and I've seen what you folks live with. So please know that it is being addressed, but that it has to go through certain channels, which is frustrating when you're the ones waiting for it to happen.
Andrew.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay. Do I have, this concludes our business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. All in favor? Aye.